Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and this week we're going to try and put to bed a problem I've had for a very long time by making a router table for my new workbench. Roll the intro. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you will know that my routing solution is based on this homemade device which sat in the edge of my Evolution table saw and sort of served as my router. It's got a Katsu router on the back. It's actually a really good router. I'll put a link in the description to the 10-minute tool review I did on it, but this is a bit basic. It's not the neatest job, no matter how hard I tried, but it has done the job, but it's never been ideal. So now is the opportunity for me to change that. So I recently put a poll in my community on the YouTube channel to get people's advice, and the overwhelming amount of people that responded said, why don't you make your own? This is a woodworking YouTube channel after all. So I've decided to do it, but more importantly than that, I've decided to upgrade my idea. Now, I purchased some things from TEMU which I'm hoping are going to turn out to be what I need as the answer to my problem, because they weren't cheap. These two units, I'll put a link in the description together. I'll put on the screen. I want to say there was something like £60 for these two bits. So I'm going to show you what's in there. The first is this very beautiful gold face plate. It's very thin, I will say, and it's got a little T-track on it, but I don't know who the T-track is for. Probably Minnie the Mouse, because it's absolutely tiny, that little T-track. But the plate is very good. It's very, very straight, and it comes with a set that includes a really rudimentary fence and well, what I can only describe as the sort of smallest crosscut I've ever seen. I mean, it does fit in there, but to be honest with you, it's not brilliant, and there's quite a lot of play in it, but it is a fence, so I can't complain. So it came with that, and it came with a fence which works along these two sides here, and it's a very rudimentary fence. It's literally just two wing nuts on screws, basically. So that's what came in the pack, but not determined not to just have that option on its own. I've also gone for this, which is the biggest issue that I had with my other router, is the fact that I cannot move it up and down. So I've gone for a lift. Now, this is very much a router table on the cheap. There are a number of options, but essentially this goes into the router plate that you just saw. It's got a little like screw thread, Allen key thread, and literally all you do is raise it or lower it, just using that. So it's as simple as that. So what I'm going to do is build a router table which I can attach to my new workbench that I'm going to use to put the mechanism in, see if it works, and see if I can lower it and raise it, which of course is the biggest issue that I've had. Now, I've got an idea in my mind of how I want it to look. Let's get making. So I've got three pieces of potential wood that I can use for the top. For this design, I'm going to go for a piece of wood that's got a shinier, sort of flatter surface. I've got three different thicknesses as well of wood, three different widths, and this top is going to actually be the bit that the router uses. So this is going to be the top level, but obviously these are all too thin, and I don't want to make this a very thin thing. I want it to be a bit more substantial. So what I'm going to do is, whichever one I'm going to select, I'm going to back it with a piece of 18mm ply, because obviously I need to put in or route in a track for my T-track. So it's got to be pretty deep, and none of these on their own are enough. But what I don't want to do is just use a piece of plywood as the top surface. I want something where it's going to be a bit more slippery, and the wood is going to move with a lot less friction. And also I'm a little bit dictated by size. I have got another piece of this. It's not in this colour, it's more sort of greyish, but it's about the same size as this. This is the only piece I've got, but again it is quite thin, but with 18mm ply underneath, and obviously it's a little bit bigger than this, so it would allow me to have that flexibility. And this piece at the end, it's a white piece, and to be honest with you, it's not in the greatest of condition, this, but I'm going to have a proper look at all three and decide which one I'm going to go for. I have to be honest, at the moment I'm leaning towards this. The only thing that worries me is the size, and if you think about the size of the plate, it's going to take up a lot of that space, and it's not going to leave much room for a T-track, whereas there's a lot more room on here, and I do want this to be quite a big unit. I don't want it to be too small, so I'm going to have a proper look and then decide which piece I'm going to go for. So having decided on the piece, I wanted to be incredibly careful with how I cut this plate out, because my previous versions of attempted router tables had always fallen down on the fact that I'd never measured them properly and I'd never managed to cut them accurately, and as a result of both of those things put together, they were either always not straight or didn't look very tidy. I just really wasn't very happy with them. So I used my set square this time, and I really took my time in measuring and marking this plate out, particularly as this plate was not cheap. Some of my other ones I have used in the past have been, but this really wasn't, and I wanted to get it exactly right. So when I've marked the outside, all I'm doing now is marking inside, just inside where I'd marked those the sort of screw fixing points, because this bit that I'm doing now obviously is going to stay there. It's just that middle section that's going to come out, and that will house the actual lift and the router itself. So I then just popped 4 holes in the corner of each of those internal that internal rectangle that I'm going to take out, and I was very careful how I did this next bit. Again, I was continuing with the marking, and this section of wood is the one that will you know, sit alongside the one that has got the router in it. So very careful. I marked this with a Sharpie. I just found that on this particular type of wood, it's actually quite difficult to see a pencil mark. And again, I'm just checking there that I've got the measurements exactly as they should be. I then got out my trusty Parkside plunge saw and just took off those 2 edges. Then I turned it around and took out the 2 lengths. So I had this board cut down size, but it wasn't the final size. You'll see later on how I did it. Again, as you can see, I'm checking every single measurement because I want to make sure it's right. And then I'm marking up for the next stage for sitting the panel. This wood is really good quality wood. It's just sort of MDF covered in Formica, I think, but it is really nice wood, and it is well worth picking them up. So if you get the opportunity to do that, then, you know, just pick a couple of bits up. It's really fab. Okay, the next stage was to drill out this piece of wood. I should have said, it looks a bit like I've jumped here. The first piece of wood that you saw me drill out, I just didn't think it was big enough. So I jumped on to this section, which is why it looks like I'm doing the same thing again. That other piece of wood originally was going to sit under it, but to be honest, I had the right depth with this and the plywood, so I didn't change it. As you can see, I'm setting up a rail here, and I'm being really careful because I wanted to get this line really straight, because this is sort of going to be on show, this edge, and I wanted to make sure I had it as neat as I could. And you can see, actually, for me, that's incredibly neat. But I also did something that I've not used to doing, which is actually going back and tidying up my work. As you can see, it's just a slight little edge there. There was just one piece that I missed with the jigsaw where I'd cut it sort of straight on the top, but I must have had the blade on a slight angle because it was sort of slightly angled underneath. So it wasn't really sitting flat and flush to the top. So I wasn't pleased with that. And in line with everything else in this project, I wanted to get it absolutely spot on. So I just put it on some pieces of scrap plywood, and then I just took the chisel to it and just took out those couple of little edges where the wood was sticking out. It was barely nothing, to be honest, and I took out very little material, you can see there. It was more about flattening it up, but as I said, it was sort of level on top and then sticking out underneath, so I'd obviously had got into a slight angle or lifted the jigsaw slightly when I was cutting it out. But I then offered it up, and as you can see, it took a bit of persuasion getting in, but just found that it was just a couple of little bits on the bottom, and obviously it's difficult cutting with a jigsaw like that. But I was pleased with how it was overall, and the hole, after a bit of finagling, was a lot neater than it was when I started. And chisel work's not normally my thing, so it's also good to have the opportunity to get a little bit of practice with the chisel as well. As you can see, this is the piece of wood underneath that I was going to use the second piece for. So here I've sort of switched them around. This was going to be two of those pieces of wood, but I just went for a piece of old plywood I had lying around, which was actually from my old workbench. So I just layered on the glue and started clamping it up, and I tried to get pressure from both sides. It does make me realise actually I haven't got enough long clamps like the ones that you can see there. I need to get some more. I know they're coming up in the Parkside sale, so I might pick a couple up. Then I just put a couple of brace clamps across the top, so I wanted to make sure there was enough pressure in the middle, not just the pressure on sort of either end, because I didn't want it to bow or sort of cup when it was drying. And then I just put on some of these bargain weights that I got from Aldi. They just sort of help to push things down. They're not a massive weight, but they're enough of a weight. So the next day I took it off. It was a really nice fit, actually glued really, really well. Not too much squeeze out, which again, for me is highly unusual. And then went back to the drill, and I then drilled the sort of 4 pilot holes to take out that middle section. This was obviously a lot more difficult because I had to angle it with a jigsaw, and due to the nature of the wood, I got a certain distance, and as you can see, the camera's wobbling, and then, whoops, I lost the camera. So having reset the camera, exactly the same thing. I just cleaned it up with a chisel. I have to say this was a lot nicer cut, but it is essentially just 2 straight lines, and the chisel went through the plywood a lot easier than it did the other wood. And I'm just leveling it up there against the edge of the sort of top profile, but this was just me sort of going over the top, really. It wasn't that bad a fit, and there was plenty of room for the router to fit in. I just sort of wanted it neater more than anything else. So I then drew the pilot holes. This is for the fixing bolts for the gold plate. You can see there around the edge. Again, really, really basic, but I pre-drilled everything. Here, I just put some really thin shims. These are offcuts from my workshop, actually, my workshop table. Just because I wanted to feel a sort of bit of pushing down on it. I probably didn't need them, to be honest. That's why they're all a bit sort of hodgepodge, but I just felt a bit more comfortable with them there. I just thought it was a better fit, and obviously when I tightened down with the screws for the metal plate, I just felt I had a bit more purchase because there was a little bit of resistance from those strips. So as you can see, it didn't make a massive piece of difference. But it did help me to get it nice and level. So I just popped in the screws, and not to over tighten them. It's really, really important. And these are the screws as well that came with a plate, I should say. And then I just went round and sort of hand tightened them because I didn't want to go too mad. And nice and level, as you can see. Pleased with that. A little bit of a gap, but nothing I'm going to worry about. I then constructed the lift for the router, which was really straightforward. Just a case of putting in those bolts and making sure that you've got them fixed in, and they sort of basically push in against and grip the router. That's how it works. It's very low tech, but surprisingly effective. So there you can see the sort of the whole cradle is all in one. The big long black screw you can see is the one that actually you use to lower it and raise it. Then it was just a case of getting the fit in the right way. I did think about where I wanted the cable actually, and I did fix this in a couple of different positions based on where the rail was. I didn't want the cable to fit, to sort of dangle too far out the back, because it's like one of those right-angled ones, but I wanted to get it in the right place. So then I just fixed it on. It was actually really difficult. It looks a lot easier here than it actually was. It was quite hard to sort of hold it with one hand and fix it underneath with the other, but I got there, and there's me just testing the bolt. You'll see now. Up and down it goes. I know it was sort of on skew width there, but that's because it was at full extension. So you can use either. I'm showing you here how I used the electronic drill, and then here I'm using the handle to raise it and lower it. So both works really well, and there you can see the process from underneath, and those 4 black pins that are pinching the side of the router, I've really, to be honest, tightened them as tight as I could, because obviously you don't want any play in that router at all, because apart from anything else, routers can be really dangerous, you know. The next thing to do was just to mark out my T-track, and I did this using the side of the built-in T-track. You can see the 2 sort of splits in the metal plate. That's for this most ridiculously pathetic little fence that they give you that comes with it, which is awful. So I wanted to mark out my own T-track. Now, you won't see this in the video, but I have put this in, but I'm thinking that I might actually change it and put in the wider T-track, because getting a couple of stops for this T-track is proving really tricky. So the temporary fence that I've got on that you'll see in a moment is okay, but to be honest, I might switch those out and just go for a bigger one. And then mark the depth of the drill bit to the depth of the T-track, and I got my little Roby palm router on it. I have to say, impressed with this palm router. It's pretty good. But I didn't make the classic mistake which I usually do, which is trying to take the entire chunk out in one go. So I was very careful, and I literally took it out piece by piece, step by step. You can see me adjusting it there. So I sort of took half of it out with the first route, and then took it all the way down with the second route. And I did sort of route into the plywood a tiny little bit that you can see there, but that doesn't matter because that plywood is coming off in a minute. I'm going to chop it off, but I got a nice fit. Then I went over, and one of the advantages of the Evolution table saw is with the original blade in, which I popped back in, you can cut through aluminium. It's good enough to cut through there. So I just popped both of those T-track rails in. They were sat nice and flush with the wood, no sticking up or anything, and perfect right angles to the plate. So I'd got exactly what I set out to do in terms of that. And then I just went back to the plunge this time just to sort of level it off. This was actually more complicated than it looks on the video, to be fair. It took a bit of going to get these exactly level. When I'd done that, the next thing was to offer it up to my new workbench. And when I made my workbench, I specifically left one of the areas with a gap in it, which you'll see in a minute. I then got these hinges from TEMU, and actually, to be fair, they're really good hinges. I'm really pleased with them, and they are going to attach to the workbench, but I just wanted a couple of braces, so I just cut a couple of pieces of 18mm plywood, and of course pocket hold them, just to fit them in, sort of get them in, just to provide that extra support for the brackets. Again, I probably didn't need to do this, but I'm doing this job properly, and I wanted to make it really belt and braces. So I fitted them in, and actually, as it turned out, I did need the one on this other side, which you'll see in a minute, because I didn't have enough support there. And there's the gap you can see. The sort of router and the cable is going to fit into in a minute. So I took my time, got them nice and level on both sides, so it's stretching that sort of void, because it's actually quite a wide router table. Again, I did that on purpose just to give me more surface area, working area, when I'm actually using the router. So I want to be able to have more of a space. This is actually the ugly underside of the thing that you just saw me cut, and there's the router plate from the bottom. Those two pieces of wood that you can see, there was no need to put those in. I literally just put them in just in case I wanted to sort of fix anything to it, or maybe put a cage around the router. I just wanted to keep them there because it's easier to do it now and have the wood to fix it to, rather than try and do it later when it's going to be more difficult. This looks really easy in YouTube land, and oh my goodness, I wish it was that easy. It was a real struggle. Because I hadn't gone for screws, I went for bolts with nuts, and it was quite limited in terms of the bracket and what I could get in there. So it did take quite a long time and quite a lot of fiddling to get it level, get it tight enough, and get it exactly where it should be. So as you can see, it took that bit of wiggling around, but they were nice and tightly fixed in. I also popped a little washer in between the nut on the back, the bolt and the wood, obviously, which didn't come with none of these fixings came with it, but I wanted to make sure it was nice and tight. And there you can see they're the ones where it sort of extends up. You pull them up and it locks in. Then you've got two like little handles or little wings that close it. I then refitted the router, obviously having taken it off because it was difficult enough lifting that table on there without the additional weight of the router. So I just popped it back in and reseated it. And again, this was really difficult. It looks lovely and easy now, but it was quite tricky balancing everything. But you can see there, no catching, works an absolute treat. So the next thing I went on to was to create a temporary fence. Now, this is very temporary, hence me using this cruddy old wood. I have ordered a metal fence from TEMU, an aluminium fence I should say. So this is just basic in case I want to use the router table between now and then. So just use the hole saw, just leveled it up with a chisel to keep it nice and straight. It's a really simple design, this. Literally, it took me about 20 minutes to make it. So just a piece of wood, leveled it up to give me some dust collection. I slid these bolts in, these sort of stop block bolts, and then I marked both sides. And that was very deliberate because it would allow me to know where to drill the holes, as you can see there, so that everything moved up and down. I remembered this time to put a piece of wood underneath, so that when I was drilling I didn't get any sort of tear out. And I then literally just connected the two to each other, really basic, clamped it up, and then I got a couple of edge pieces after I popped it together with my airstrike gun, just a couple of sort of blocks on the inside, just inserts, just to keep it nice and level at 45 degrees. And then I just popped in a couple of pins on those. I don't think I recorded that, but there is a couple of pins on there. It doesn't look very equal, that side. It's because of the wood and the way it's stuck. It actually is at perfect right angles. So then I just hooked it in, connected it up, and to my utter surprise, it worked exactly as I wanted it to. So I gave it a little test. I am going to have to level it up, and that's absolutely fine. I expected that, but I gave it a test, and as you can see, it worked perfectly. Raised it up, tested it again. Really, really pleased with how it turned out. So, fellow woodworkers, the router table is finished, and I can't hide the fact that I'm actually really pleased with how it turned out. The lift works really, really well. You do need to make sure you've got the fence in the right place for the lift to work though, but the lift works really, really well. The whole unit, as you can see, drops down and folds into place exactly as I imagined it going. Each of these folding shelves that I've got, as you'll have seen in the video, I used bolts to attach them. I didn't just want to leave it to screws. Each one of these can supposedly take up to 8 kilograms in weight, giving a total capacity of 16. But to be honest with you, this probably only weighs about 4, and every time I use it, I'll be very careful how I do it. The fence is obviously really temporary. This is not going to be the proper fence. I've actually ordered some proper sort of aluminum fencing to go on it, which I'm just waiting to have delivered. So this is just going to go on there for now. it's rare for me to have a project where I think actually that's turned out in exactly the way I wanted it to. The lift mechanism and the plate from TEMU was a really good idea. It's worked really well. The plate is a little bit sunken on one side, but I have got the opportunity to use some shims and just raise that up a little bit. But weirdly, it's fine in the corner, fine on this corner, but there's a little bit of a gap in the middle. But I'm not too worried about that. To achieve what I wanted to set out to achieve, you have to say the project has been a success. I would really love to have your feedback, fellow woodworkers. What do you think on my homemade router table? Do you think it's a goer? Do you think I've achieved what I wanted to? I'd love to get your feedback, so please leave them in the comments below. I'll put links to all of the things that I've used here in there. To be honest, most of it came from TEMU. The folding shelves did. The sliding T-pins did, and so did the T-track. So pretty much all from there, but again, you can buy them everywhere. If this is your first time at the Garage Workshop, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please can I ask you to subscribe, like, and comment, and hit the notification bell. Comments are really important to the algorithm. It really helps build the channel. If you are a regular viewer, thank you so much for watching this week. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you like the finished project. Also, don't forget to like and comment. I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care, fellow woodworkers.